All right, guys, I apologize. I had a little bit of the hiccup there. So today we're going to be going over some details about the CMA and making your CMA stand out in the pack whenever you're going up against these other listings and going up against other listing agents. You want your CMA to stand out and be exceptional whenever you're walking through this process. And I'm going to be using tools that are already provided by the National Association of Realtors when we actually go through this process. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. If you give me a second, let me move some stuff around here. So going through the details, basically we are looking at this. All right, so today we're going to be using this property as our example. So we are at a property at 620 Natasha. Keep in mind, I just picked whatever random property that popped up first into my MLS, and then I simply drag that MLS over on the right-hand side. So you could be doing this on a previous property, you could be doing this on a buyer property, you could be doing it in a lot of different formats. I just clicked over to RPR. If you need to get to RPR a little bit quicker, you can simply type on this menu and type in RPR, and it pops up right there, opens up, and will open up to the main dashboard. In this case, I'm going to use this property at 620 Natasha. So first things first, we want to kind of examine this as a whole. So we have our address, we have some photos that are directly drawn from the MLS, and then we have some other information, things like overhead photos, street photos, and then some historical if the listing has been in the MLS in the previous. All right, so once we have all those details, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to this section because this is actually where we're going to be working with a lot of our details. So the first part is our list price. This is going to be directly drawn from MLS. Second part is going to be the RVM value, or in that case, it is defined as a realtor valuation model. Now, this is going to be the basis that they're taking all their public data, crunching it down, and then making this actually be the value. All right. And then you have your refined value and your comp analysis value. Now, we're going to look at two of these fashions because you can use both of these tools to actually define value. But before I do that, as you'll notice at the top right-hand corner here, you have history, charts, refined value, CMA, and then neighborhood. We also have a part up here that is called reports. Now, in the reports, you can define this property as multiple different reports. And we're going to get into that in a second because that's one of the biggest parts of RPR that allows you to provide value to the actual client. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull some detail. So I'm going to go down. I'm not going to click on the refined value. I'm actually going to use a comp analysis. And the reason I want to do that is because it opens up a different report, and that is going to be called the property valuation report or valuation workbook. And that's what I actually want to get to here is I want to be able to provide as much value as possible. And this valuation workbook isn't actually accessible until we've actually run this information. So if I click on run report, this will tell me that an address is required to generate the report. Once I do add an address to the property, though, it actually will restrict me from going to that report unless I've gone through this revised analysis. So let's go ahead and create a CMA here. Now, this is going to bring the first parts. So there's a comparative market analysis based on comps, and then there's a sales comparison analysis. Now, I would normally go through the process of a sales comparison analysis, but because we're running through this as quick as possible, I'm going to stick with comparative analysis today. Now, the question of what is the difference? One, they are using just a sliding meter to identify the value, whereas the other, you're actually defining the value. And how does that mean something to you is think of it very simply like this. If you want to move that value based on specific numbers that you've retained over time, okay? So if you've defined that a bedroom is worth X dollar, as compared to one that doesn't have a bedroom, well, that's going to be that thing that you would define based on value. Now, one of the factors that I want you to focus on here is if we use a comparative market analysis, the first thing that I have to do is I have to actually verify all my facts. So I want to verify things like living square feet, lot square feet, as well as any remainder details that have been added to the property. I can also add things that have been added to the property if I want to give it valuation. Once I confirm those facts, that property now translates into this next factor that says find comps. Now, there is two things that you can do here. You can actually find comparables down at the bottom here if you wanted to use that factor, okay? You could search by bed, bath, living square feet, and total square feet. I prefer to actually use what is called known properties. So I would click on this add known property, and then it allows me to add an address or an MLS listing. Now, why is this so important is because you're a master at technique, right? You master the tool set that you have. Now, that tool set is based on what tools you bring to the table. So if I went back over to my MLS sheet, and I pulled up some basic details on this, all right? So I'm just going to run a real quick search. So this is in Los Torres Altos de Anthony, okay? So I'm going to run that real quick as a area just so I can pull some properties. Now, when I'm doing my search, I'm going to run a quick search on that subdivision. Okay, so when I add that subdivision, that's going to be my primary point that I'm going to look up, and it pops up there. I'm going to look for details about that property because I want those to be the primaries of my search criteria, okay? And basically, I'm going to pull only active properties. I don't want active properties, so I'm going to actually pull just closed properties, and I'm going to look at closed properties in the past 90 days. Okay, so I'm only going to be looking at these. Now, obviously, I can narrow this search a little bit more. For this quick purpose and quick demonstration, I'm going to leave that. And let's see what kind of properties that pops up for me. All right, so that popped up 5 results. I'm going to look at this in a little quick detail as far as a detail, and it looks like they're all fairly similar, but let's just use a couple of these as points. So I'm going to grab this address or this MLS number, and I'm going to drop it over and drop that into the system. Once I do that, it brings up the property, and then I'm going to grab another one. So I'm going to grab this one and then do the same thing, grab the MLS number, and run over to RPR. Now, here is the reason that I'm actually doing this class today is because I found that a lot of people are actually using the CMA valuation from Flex. So I asked a question of about 10 agents, and of those 10 agents, a solid 7 of them are just using a Flex CMA. Now, here's the downside to a Flex CMA, is a Flex CMA is great for value, to identify value, to adjust value. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't differentiate you from the next real estate agent that may be walking into their home to do a listing presentation. And if it's not differentiating you, you're going to ask the question of, as a client, what is the reason that I'm choosing you? Now, a statement was made that it's because you are selling your value, and that is absolutely true. But why not back that up with a strong presentation? And that's what this can do. And like I said, this is a product that's already provided to you. Why would you not use something that is provided that honestly, timeline is taking about the same timeline? So once we have these 2 properties in here, I'm going to just use these 2 for today. I'm going to define those values, and it's going to update the valuation. The next thing it allows me to do is adjust the comps. Now, this is the changing point between doing this top one, a comparative analysis, and a sales comparison analysis. If I adjust these comps right now, it's based on a slider method, okay? So I'm going to say, is this property better or worse than the actual comparable? So how does it compare? Is this property the same, or is it better? And these are the details that it would adjust my numbers. Now, keep in mind that these adjustments are very arbitrary. They're using terms and resources that they have put into category, but they're not defining things like bed, bath, square footage. They're defining just condition. In my opinion, that's not going to be the necessary best way to present yourself. But in this resource for a quick term, this can be a quick way to get to those numbers. Once again, I make those adjustments on either property, and then I would simply click on Update Valuation. Now, if I had selected the other one, and I'd gone to a sales comparison analysis, when I did that, I can actually do all the same details. I can actually pull the comps from the other side. So maybe one is your pre-listing appointment presentation, and then the next one is going to be the other one. So this asks, do you want to copy the comps over? Yes. And here, I'm going to make a little bit of a different type of adjustment. So once again, this is kind of like an appraisal adjustment basing on what is the difference on a bedroom cost, a difference on a bath cost, and also the same thing goes based on square footage, because 1,600 square feet to 1,512 square feet is actually pretty substantial in the bottom line number. So I would make an actual physical adjustment here. Now, your question is, where would I get those adjustments? Well, that's what you're going to learn over time, or there are tools and resources out there that will define the difference of valuation. Now, the way an appraisal works is very simple. You find one that has it and one that doesn't, and then find out what the value difference is between. So in a price per square foot, for instance, you would find the premium dollar and then the non-premium dollar, find out what the difference is between the two, and then you can define what that value per dollar should be for this property. All right. Once again, I'm going to go back because I told you that we weren't going to go too deep into it today. So we're going to do a comparative analysis. Once I do that, I've adjusted my comps. I want to create my report. Now, here's where it actually starts to get more focused on you. Now, the first part is that you want to see what a sample looks like. But if you adjust this little statement right here, if you scroll over, this will give you a breakdown of what each page looks like. And that way you can see what things you want to add to your presentation or take away from your presentation. Now, remember, the seller's report is a great report, but one of the ones that I really enjoy is the valuation report. Now, this is what pops up if you don't do that actual detailed analysis. So it says no data available to generate a valuation workbook. You must go through the steps to create a sales comparison analysis. So this would be that extra step of going through and actually adding numeric values to those changes between square footage and other details. So once again, that is something that I do suggest because the report detail of what comes out in the valuation workbook, in my opinion, is what can make you stand out even better. Now, with all that being said, guys, there's also other details that you can add. You can add all elements, name, photos. You can adjust this. You can actually generate and add in other pages to this presentation that are specific to you. Now, why is that so powerful? Is because, once again, you want to define your presentation something different than all the other presentations that are out there. And this is why it is so important for you to make sure that you're spending some time and energy on building up that listing presentation to be top of mind. Remember, guys, at the end of the day, what we're all looking for is how do we stand out above the rest? And the real key here is to stand out above the rest, we have to go through the steps. Now, in the RPR tool set, there are a lot of great resources, and a lot of it is trial and error and asking questions. So remember, as always, I'm always here accessible for those questions to be asked because we've used this pretty regularly over time. This is what all my listing agents actually use for their presentation factor. There's also a big resource at the end of the presentation that you can add in that is defining things like absorption rate and so on and so forth. So these are great tools and resources to stand out above the rest when you're in that presentation. But there are other tools as well. Place like if you're in the El Paso MLS or many around the country, Remine is a great resource. Now, it's not as robust and doesn't have as much detail, but it also has a lot of tools that come into play. The other thing that is also a great resource is Cloud CMA. Now, Cloud CMA is offered by some MLSs. It's not offered by all. It is a product that you can pay for and does have some other tools and resources that can add value. But the real key here is not whether you use RPR, Cloud CMA, even if you use Flex, that's okay. The real key is how are you going to use that presentation to define yourself as separate whenever somebody else is walking in with something that looks very similar. So the key is making sure that your presentation, whether you use that Flex one or you use an RPR one, what is going to define you separately from everybody else? And that's the real key, and that's the thing I want you to focus on after all this training, is that you need to do that detail alone. Guys, thank you for your time. I hope this was somewhat beneficial for you. And if you have any questions, if you need anything else, please don't hesitate. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all you do in the real estate market. Remember, guys, the real estate market is defined by one simple factor, and that's what realtors are doing through the process and how they're pricing the homes. Realtors define the market because they're the ones that tell a client to either go higher or lower based on price point. And the CMA is one of those tools and tricks of the trade to help you in that process to either take the price up or, on the reverse side of that, take the price down, depending on what kind of market you're in. In the current market like we're dealing with right now, a seller's market, it is key to provide value so you can make sure that you get uneducated sellers to a point where they understand what you're actually discussing. The CMA is one of those tools that does that great. And remember, As always, guys, thank you for joining. Have a great day. We're sitting at about 15 minutes. Enjoy the week.